Hey guys, Mike here. We're going to do a variant on that Sulphur Nymph that I tied in the last video. This one is going to incorporate some pale yellow Spectre blend dubbing and a piece of yellow silk floss to imitate the sulfur breaking through the nymph case. So we're going to start off with a number 16 hook. Because these sulfurs range in size on the South Holston and the Watauga, you can use anything from a 14 for early season sulfurs right up to a 20 for later season sulfurs. I'm going to wax the thread. That's not always necessary with today's modern threads, but I do that as a matter of habit. I'm going to start the thread slightly behind the hook eye and wrap back to the point of the hook, or between the point of the hook and the barb. And for the tail, we're going to use bleached dyed ginger pheasant tail. 4 or 5 strands pulled up 90 degrees from the stem, popped off. That'll line up your tips by bringing it up 90 degrees. The length of the tail is about the length of the shank of the hook, so measure that out. Pinch it off between your fingernails and bring it to the hook at a 45-degree angle. You can put the fibers on your side of the hook. Come over the top with 1 or 2 wraps. That'll roll the pheasant tail up onto the top of the hook, and then put 1 wrap underneath the tail to get it to stand up a little bit. Now, a wrap or 2 in front of the pheasant tail. And now we're going to add a piece of gold wire for the ribbing on this one. I'm using Ultra Extra Small because I tie a lot of the smaller ones. You can use just a plain small sized, works pretty good. Bring that to the front side of the pheasant tail fibers and wrap forward about halfway between the hook and the eye of the hook. The hook point and the eye of the hook. Then, like we did with the earlier fly, we're going to use some of this brush-on nail glue by Kiss. It costs $2 at Dollar General. It is cyanoacrylate, so it is just plain old super glue. I just put a little tiny dab on top of the thread, and that will lock in your pheasant tail when you wrap it. Then we bring our pheasant tail around the hook in touching turns, so it gives you a segmented look to the body. Until you reach the fly line. Then pick up your fly line, bend the fibers forward, and wrap over the hook 3 times to lock that in place. You can then clip off the fibers. Now, if you notice here, we had 1 stray fiber that didn't wrap, and that's okay. We can just pluck that right off. We'll rib the fly with the gold wire by counter wrapping it, which means it goes in the opposite direction around the hook shank that your thread goes. So we're going to counter wrap the gold wire through the pheasant tail, give it 4 or 5 wraps, bring it up to the thread, same thing, bring it forward, 1, 2, 3 wraps of thread, and clip off your excess. Now you should have a nice segmented body with a gold rib, and the tail should be standing up. And that's a good imitation of the actual bug. Now we're going to tie in the wing case. We're going to use the same ginger dyed pheasant tail. And you'll want to take 10 or so fibers. And it's not super important that they're 90 degrees from the stem. It's just a good habit to get into. Because what you're going to do is you're going to clump them up, and you notice all these little ratty ends here. we're going to clip those off so that your pheasant tail is 90 degrees straight across. You'll notice that that end of the pheasant tail is a little darker, and we like that because that'll give us a little darker wing cases, much like the natural. We want to bring that to the hook and tie it on, lifting on it as we wrap backwards towards the point where the pheasant tail body ended. Okay. Now, the next step for this is to tie in a piece of yellow floss. In this case, I'm using silk. You can use synthetic, obviously that'll work too. And you'll want to tie that in with 3 or 4 wraps and get it right up on top of the hook, right dead center in the middle. Now, here's the tricky part. It's really not tricky, but you'll want to separate your pheasant tail fibers into equal numbers and bring the silk floss right down between the middle of them so that you have an even number of pheasant tail fibers on either side of the silk. And you can kind of stroke that up to get it to stay and just let that rest. Clip off your excess silk and give your thread a little touch of dubbing wax. And similar to the last fly that we did, we're going to use a Spectra blend, but this hare's ear is dyed light yellow, a pale yellow color. You can use a bright sulfur orange-ish yellow for the flies that come later in the year. They have a much brighter yellow. This one, we're going to touch dub just by touching your dubbing onto your wax thread and give it a light twist so it's fuzzy. Give it a couple wraps around the fly to create a thorax. And this one here, I think we'll put legs on it just for fun. So I'll take the tip of a Hungarian partridge feather, grab onto the middle of the tip with a pair of hackle pliers and brush back the feathers. What you see there is, got one stray one here. There we go. You'll notice the tip, and then you have the feathers that are 90 degrees from the stem of the feather. Clip off the tip and brush that forward. You'll notice that now you have a V with legs, and I think I have too many, so I'm going to peel off half a dozen on each side. And that feather will be used as the legs. Place that V on either side of your pheasant tail, slide it forward until your length looks right, and pinch the feathers to the side of the thorax. Give it a couple good tight wraps. Give it a wrap in front. Clip off the stem. And that will give you an imitation of some legs. Now, take your pheasant tail, pull it straight up, keeping your silk or your floss behind it. Bring it forward. And here's what I was talking about with the last video. I like to put a little bubble in my pheasant tail case. And the way I do that is to pinch it with my fingernails, slide my fingernails over the eye of the hook and hang on. And that'll allow me to just drop my thread over the top of my fingernails, and it will stay behind the eye of the hook. Then I can lift up on the front of it, wrap once in front of it. Now, I'll take my silk thread or silk floss and bring it forward over the top of the case. And this, same thing, this will give you an imitation of that bug starting to break through. See how you got that yellow on top of the case? Bring the whole mess back up. One wrap in front of the, or 2 wraps to get everything behind the eye. Clip off your excess. you remember in the last video, you can then tidy it up with a couple wraps around the eye of the hook. And we're going to varnish the thread, not the eye. That'll keep it clean and keep it off of your dubbing by rubbing your Sally Hansen's hard as nails onto the thread itself and then giving it a 4-wrap whip finish. Tighten up your thread, snip off the excess, and there you go. And you don't have to worry about, if you use the legs, you'll see how the legs look with the partridge feather sticking out of the sides. You don't have to worry about the thorax being too buggy or fuzzy looking like we did with the hare's ear. So there you have it. You can see the bright yellow on top of the wing casing, the dark buds of the wing casing on either side, the pheasant tail body, the upright tail, and the legs. This is an awesome imitation of hatching sulphurs. The wing case can also be done using 2 brown goose biots. You tie them in by the tip on either side of your floss. Bring the biots and the floss or foam forward at the same time and tie them all in, and that'll give you a yellow stripe down the middle of the wing case also. So there you have it. Hope that works for you. That's variant number 2 on the June OMTU fly swap.